Good afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime Series with Kevin, where we add value to people's lives, happening every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday on ebizradio.com at around 12 o'clock. You can catch the Lunchtime Series on all major podcast channels, and for our lunchtime marketing segment, proudly supported by Hollard Insurance, hashtag big ads for small businesses. As per usual, joining us, our marketing and communications expert, Craig Page-Lee. How are you doing, Craig?
Kevin, I'm great. Yeah, gosh, chatting again. It felt like just yesterday we were on the blower together.
Yeah, and having our voting happening in our general election. So it's from what I've heard, not the biggest turnout, and but
Yeah,
at least
Kevin, I think the political landscape is so messed in South Africa at the moment. I can clearly understand that there would be a lot of lazy voters or non-voters. I also think
yeah,
though, if they made voting day in the middle of the week, one day in the middle of the week, it might have been less disruptive because I think a lot of people took the liberty of having a long weekend and
yeah.
they used it for social benefit, not for changing the future of the country benefit.
Yeah, and it almost shows. I think the turnout really shows the kind of uh, mood.
Disenchantment.
Yeah, there's a good word. Yeah, disenchantment that the public of South Africa is feeling for what we have to go through. But I mean, with that, it's not a political conversation today. We had a really great conversation around diversity and inclusion last week, and I remember you mentioning that awareness on diversity and inclusion increases proper business ethics and decreases financial and reputational risk for a company. So, before we start with today's conversation, what are the key takeaways from last week's conversation, Craig?
Yeah, Kevin, thanks. And that definitely is a good phrase that you referenced there as well. So there are lots of key points. We covered a nice broad range of different angles coming to the conversation last week. But there was a really simple chart that was published on the talentlift.com site, which sets out 10 benefits of diversity in the workplace. The article was titled Diversity in the Workplace, and it notes the following 10 points. So the first point is perspective. So a variety of perspectives from employees with different backgrounds definitely help deliver greater diversity, and obviously that leads into the phrase, increasing business capability and profitability. The second point is increased creativity. So your company becomes a melting pot of new, fresh ideas when you have a great, diverse and inclusive team. More innovations. There's different backgrounds, bringing new ideas and sparking different kinds of innovation for the organization. Increased profits being the fourth point. A creative, diverse workforce definitely brings financial benefits. We picked up on this in a couple of points and for different reasons last week. The fifth point here being higher engagement. Employees who feel appreciated definitely become more engaged as a collective workforce. The sixth point here being better decision making. So the more potential solutions you receive from a broader diversified workforce, you get better decision making within the team as well. Seventh point is employee turnover. By having employees feeling accepted and valued, you're definitely going to decrease your employee turnover. A really important point is point number 8, better your reputation. Good human and socially responsible companies build stronger reputation. There's no doubt about that, and that is actually measured on the bottom line quite clearly. Hiring results, strong reputation, and now segue from the previous point, strong reputation, employee brand turns companies into desirable places to work. And then the final point there is problem solving. Good, diverse solutions can definitely bring the best results so far, Kevin. But taking these points into account, it's definitely worth reiterating the point that you made a short while ago, where awareness on diversity and inclusion increases proper business ethics and decreases financial and reputational risk for a company.
Okay, you know what just noticing the top 10 points here, it reminds me of the conversation we had about Nancy Klein, and having really good conversation around, and involving everyone and having everyone heard and have a point. The points are quite similar, actually.
So that's really great to hear you say that. I actually went into Nancy Klein's article after last week's conversation, believe it or not, just because I felt there, it was all about creating the right environments, and I was totally blown away at the similarities of the key reference points. So obviously, her principles in terms of time to think, a guideline for thinking environment. Here they are here, giving everyone a turn. Begin with a
Absolutely.
positive reality without being gushy. Let them finish. Identify assumptions and ask incisive questions. Divide into thinking pairs. Go around again. Give permission to tell the truth. Allow people's feelings. End with a positive turn. Yeah, and those are the frameworks to creating that wonderful thinking environment. And when you see that in the context of inclusion and diversity inclusion, you can see the amazing mesh and overlap of some of those principal points.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Craig, moving on to today's exciting show, please share with us and with the listeners, what are we going to chat about today?
Yeah, Kevin, as I mentioned last week, I want to continue the conversation of diversity and inclusion, but actually I want to look at which global brands and companies are actually getting it right, and what are the key things that they're doing that we can learn from, and hopefully then our listeners, apply into their own organizations. Yeah, so I want to start by referencing two. Yeah. I want to start by referencing two key brands that we all know very well. And before going into definitions and all that, again, we covered the definitions last week. So I really want to get down to the core of what actually is being done on the street per se. So the two brands are Nike and Dove. And interestingly, both these brands have been active in addressing the topic of diversity and inclusion in their advertising for many years. Some going as far back as 2004, 2014, 2017. So we can see brands that stand out, that really understand the premise, and these two are two very important brands that are getting it right. So there's an article published titled 4 Brands Embracing Diversity in Their Content. It was published by Hannah Sears, a freelance writer at Pixley, and was found on the pixleybrand.com marketing blog. And she shares several key insights on those two brands. And let's have a pick up on this. So the opening paragraph of the article states the following. Inclusive marketing is more than just a buzzword. Brands who embrace diversity in their campaigns, content, and hiring practices are representing a wide range of races, genders, orientation, and abilities, to name a few things. More than ever before, consumers are holding brands accountable to make key marketing changes to showcase the different faces and voices. The brands who are the most successful are committed to representing real people consistently in their ads, on their websites, and within their organizations. And from experience and being in this industry for a while, Kevin, Nike and Dove definitely are two brands that are playing that out. So let's have a look at that. From a Nike point of view, probably the most recognized brand of all time, not just in sportswear and equipment, but Nike's campaigns have really amplified the voices of underrepresented communities, Kevin. And their brand has created a series of really great ads under the campaign titled Until We All Win. And the objective there is to highlight the story of Indigenous people and LGBTQIA plus athletes. The campaign's goal is to unite and inspire people to take action in their communities, and it uses the power of sports to achieve that. And as we've noted a number of times before, Nike is really single-minded in its focus on demonstrating how sport is actually an enabler and unifier for people all over the world. But building on that from Nike, they really have a long history at demonstrating supports of causes, Kevin, and these are done to reflect their values. But I don't know if you can remember, as far back as 2017, they introduced the hijab design for Muslim women athletes, and that was then followed up in 2019 when they launched their new swimwear range designed for women who wear hijab as well. So they really understand not just representation, but actually what the physical needs are for the communities. And they were, in addition to the advertising campaign, they used diverse models on their site and feature a wide range of voices and backgrounds on social media. And it's not the perfectly crafted Photoshop faces, it's real people in every instance as well.
Craig, it reminds me of Shonda Rhimes, the creator of Grey's Anatomy, when she was interviewed about having these diverse groups of people in the storyline and having gay couples and interracial couples and interracial families. And when they asked her about this, she was like, well, this is not something new. This is life. This is real life that we're showing. And I think that's, speaks to Nike, with like who's the people that they're speaking to. And real life people are Muslim, and they are different types of cultures, different types of religion, and how do they show up in that environment? So even with creating the hijab for the Muslim athletes, you kind of go, they speak into real life people, and I think
Absolutely.
that's such a significant point of why it is Nike's Nike.
And understanding the fundamentals of those individuals as well. You don't get the right to go and be a sports person without wearing your hijab. But just that's a given. Yeah. But the second brand that really plays to this as well, Kevin, is Dove, as I mentioned, and they definitely have stood out by far over a couple of years now with their really clever campaigns. And just to reiterate, Dove is a range of products that's produced within the consumer goods company Unilever. So since 2016, they have committed to demonstrating more diversity in their marketing and advertising. And here the key objective is to push for more progressive, particularly representation of women in advertising. So they've put a concerted effort into this pledge, Kevin. They've been conducting consumer tests across 1,500 advertisements to identify the kinds of stereotypes about gender and ethnicity, and they've used this feedback to ensure that they highlight the key areas where they're weak and actually move away from the sore point there. So that fantastic campaign, the Dove Real Beauty campaign, which was launched, as I mentioned, as far back as 2004, it actually runs today, Kevin, some 16 to 17 years later. And it just goes to demonstrate that when you're dealing with real issues and real people, there's longevity in being able to hold the right conversation and represent the right issues here. So the key focus there was to feature real women and never models. And they show women of different ages, different body shapes, different ethnicities. And there was a lot of user-generated content that came along with the campaign. And the women featured in the campaign all approved the images. Dove does not manipulate or distort a single image through Photoshop or any enhancement software, which is fantastic. But on a final note about Dove, Kevin, the brand has actually understood the need to represent men, and they've developed a line of men's products in 2010 with the learnings from the woman-focused advertising. And on the back of that, they've been able to adapt the men-focused advertising to overcome the typical hyper-masculine tone of men's products. And since then, their ad focus has been on breaking cultural norms and stereotypes that pervade marketing for men's products, picking up from all of the learnings on the woman, the success of the woman's campaign.
What's interesting, Craig, is how well it ties into, by these considerations and by the learnings of that as a brand. It also showcases the agile and ability for them to adapt to their market and start, having another stream of income, really, a whole another segment of the market that they sort of taking up.
No, that's a great point, Kevin. Yeah, absolutely. When you are inclusive and there's genuine understanding and commitment to that, you're going to appeal to a broader sector of society, and those sectors are quite niched. But when you look at the collective and the buying power that exists within that, and if the representation is there, unquestionable, that definitely is value to the bottom line.
Yeah. So we've already seen how some brands are actively demonstrating diversity and inclusion in their advertising campaigns. But how do we know which companies are getting this right, and how is it measured?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I looked deep into the web to see this, because we're hearing about the UN Sustainable Development Goals, we're hearing about the ESG scores and things like that. But what was really, really great is I did investigation on diversion and inclusion, on diversity and inclusion, particularly because it is very closely aligned to components of ESG scores. And for a reminder of our listeners there, the ESG definition being environmental, society, and governance. And as we mentioned before for Kevin, companies with high ESG scores outperform their competitors. So it goes without saying that those that get it right around diversity and inclusion, as well as the high scoring ESG components, are absolutely going to have an advantage in the marketplace, unquestionable. And I came across an interesting report that actually was referenced in an article I read on fortune.com. So the article was titled "The Top 20 Fortune 500 Companies on Diversity and Inclusion." It was published by Marco Quiroz Gutierrez, excuse my pronunciation, on the 2nd of June this year, and it addresses the measures and reporting of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it was really great to see, because I didn't know any metrics existed in the form of a report. And it made for really interesting reading, but most importantly, it introduced me to Refinitiv ESG Contributor Tool, which is the mechanic that actually runs this particular proposition. So before we learn about the tool, provide some background on Refinitiv, a really interesting company listed on the London Stock Exchange. And it's actually one of the world's largest providers of financial market data and infrastructure. And they actually assess companies relative to the ESG scores and ESG commitments, and they're able to inform and guide investment and participation in those shares through these kinds of reports. So the Refinitiv company provides information, insights, and technology that enable consumers and customers to execute critical investing, trading, and risk decisions with confidence. So the report opens with the following statement, Kevin. Following heightened international focus on social injustice and racial inequality, Fortune and Refinitiv have joined forces to help businesses across all industries address one of the most challenging areas of our time: building a truly inclusive workplace. So the Measure Up initiative aims to make diversity, equity, and inclusion disclosure and performance a critical metric for business success. For this analysis, we leverage the Refinitiv diversity and inclusion data to create a relative benchmark and identify the most progressive companies in diversity and minority inclusion. And I must tell you, it was really great to come across this report. So important to understand that the Measure Up score ranks companies based on their disclosure and performance relative to the Fortune 500 companies. And the important emphasis here is there are many companies that are making statements against these metrics, but they're actually washing it and hiding it in their statements, whereas there are a good number of companies on the Fortune 500 that are actually producing their own results and reporting it in a very clear way for the public. So the key takeaway is that disclosure of data plays a critical role in how well a company has been ranked for this analysis, and companies that disclose the most have the best percentage breakdowns for the numeric data measured, and they obviously come out better in the final ranking. So the goal at the end of the day is to make diversity disclosure a critical metric for stakeholder-driven businesses, and that therefore includes all businesses. So the project initiatives are as follows. The Fortune will leverage Refinitiv's diversity and inclusion data to create new benchmarks and identify the most progressive companies in minority group inclusions. And these metrics will in future be reflected in the Fortune 500 listing starting from this year, as well as across Fortune 1000 company pages, in order to track that progress over time. So as we had in our early days of triple bottom line reporting and the King Report 1, 2, and 3, these kind of metrics are going to be benchmark metrics that need to be absorbed into other measures like we have in South Africa.
So, I mean, Craig, it's great to see such an important measure being developed, but what does the report focus on, though?
Yeah, Kevin, a broad range of metrics. Some of those we've actually touched on during some of our previous conversations, but in essence, it's ranking the most progressive companies in diversity and inclusion. And using the Refinitiv diversity inclusion data and figures sourced from public disclosure, the report addresses 14 key metrics, and those include the percentage of minorities on board, percentage of employees that are women, and obviously the percentage of employees that have disabilities. But the areas of measurement are listed as follows. So number one, the minority group data picks up on four metrics, and these are fairly new to the report. Last year they didn't exist. This year was the first time they came through. Minority employees percentage: Asian, Black, African, American, Hispanic, Latino, white, or other. Minority managers percentage, again in the Asian, Black, or African American, Hispanic, or Latino, white, other. Minority board percentages as above, and then minority salary gap. So really important components to get that level playing field. The previous metrics consisted of women employees, new women employees, women managers, gender pay gap percentage, employees with disabilities, employee resource groups, policy diversity and opportunity, target diversity and opportunity, daycare services, and an interesting one, and policy board diversity. So yeah, a great number of these metrics, I believe, are used by organizations in South Africa when developing their employment equity plans. And I'm sure you've come across that in some of the leadership work that you're doing. But that said, I don't think any reports exist for companies listed on the JSE in South Africa, especially in respect of ESG statements and commitments and how they are supported through diversity and inclusion statements, Kevin.
Great. When you detail it like this, in point form, you start realizing how much information there is and how much needs to be considered, which is quite interesting. It's just a group thing.
Yes, and that's an important point you make there as well, because when there is so much that needs to be reported, the flip side of that is it's easy to hide some of it. And it's going to take time for more companies to get to really understand what the metrics mean, how to really maximize the value of those metrics, but then how to report it truthfully so that they really do raise up above their competitors and gain that advantage.
Yeah. So with these measures now in place, what companies are making the data available for inclusion in the ranking, and what does the ranking look like?
Yeah, Kevin, the Fortune 500 list, there are a couple of really successful, well-known businesses that are making the information available. And they're doing this because they know that they can leverage that information to gain advantage. So just looking at the top 10 companies with the best diversity inclusion numbers from that report, we note them as Microsoft, technology enabled; Centene, a healthcare company; number 3 is Target, the retailer; number 4 is Gap, the apparel retailer; number 5 is Biogen. Interestingly, it's a neuroscience business. Number 6 is Intel, technology business. 7, Verizon Communications, obviously a communications group. Number 8 is Allstate, an insurance company. Number 9 is PVH, the clothing retail group that owns the likes of Tommy Hilfiger and Calvin Klein. And number 10 is Bank of America, financial services business. And what's great about that, Kevin, is I think technology are the only two, there are 2 technology companies and there are 2 retail companies. The rest are all from quite diverse mixed industry types. So it's really good to see that kind of spread. But it's also worth noting that Amazon ranks in at number 11, Nike at number 12, and Visa at number 14. And whilst Nike is doing what it does in its advertising campaigns and really pushing and promoting the sentiment, it's only coming in at number 12 in terms of the collective ranking. So I think they probably not understanding what the metrics are relative to that kind of measure, but definitely know how to talk to society in the right compelling way.
Also,
Go for it. Yeah, go for it.
No, I'm just saying, like Tommy Hilfiger. I remember that in the news where they actually had, well, way back, probably a couple of years ago, where they actually had a bit of a racist advert that they showcased. And I remember thinking, wow, as Tommy Hilfiger being Tommy Hilfiger, to put an ad out like that would have quite the repercussion. So to see them on this list, they've obviously done some work and really looked at what they're doing now.
Yeah, and I think there again, there's the benefit of having a very strong holding company
Mm.
that fundamentally believes and delivers in this regard, and the other group companies need to come on board, and at least when you've got a collective to help and guide and mentor you to come on board, yes. But gosh, Kevin, I do remember that period as well. There was definitely some racist and or anti-Semitic
Yeah.
activities or statements that were happening around that period. Yeah, yeah.
So, Craig, are you able to provide some examples of what the companies are specifically doing to increase their diversity inclusion scores, and how are they gaining advantage in this regard?
Yeah, Kevin. Another great article titled Nine Companies Around the World That Are Embracing Diversity in a Big Way provides some great insights into that. And it talks about the activities, initiatives that are actually being deployed by these companies and how that's helping them achieve and set their objectives and targets there. So, published on the socialtalent.com recruitment blog, Kevin, the article reiterates the point that diverse organizations perform better. It's a given. Their ebook titled How to Increase Diversity Through Improved Hiring and Recruitment Processes also highlights a number of key insights on the benefits of embracing diversity. And the three key stand-up points for me out of that ebook talk around the fact that most studies surrounding diversity in the workplace have found that for every 1% increase in gender diversity, company revenue can increase by 3%, Kevin.
Oh, wow.
High levels of ethnic diversity increase revenue by a substantial 15% overall. 67% of active and passive job seekers say that when evaluating companies and job offers, it's important to them that the company has a diverse workforce. And whilst there may be typical themes from industry to industry, each company embraces diversity and inclusion in a very different way. And the nine companies that were listed in that article are Sodexo, which is a French food services and facilities managed company. Never heard of it in my life. Johnson & Johnson, which we all know, the medical devices, pharmaceuticals, and consumer goods company. MasterCard, definitely know, the financial services business. Accenture, professional services and consulting. Kaiser Permanente, which is a managed healthcare business. Ernst & Young, or EY, a professional services business. Coca-Cola, the beverage company. Marriott International, tourism and hospitality. And Novartis, the pharmaceutical business. And again, as with the top 10 of the previous list in the Fortune 500 ranking, you can see a nice broad spectrum of industry types here. And it's great to see that diversity and inclusion isn't segregated to particular business types only. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to cover a few of those brands, Kevin, but looking specifically at a mix of the industry types, as I mentioned. So let's start with J&J, Johnson & Johnson, the medical device, pharmaceutical and consumer goods company. They've got over 132,000 employees worldwide. So really, managing programs like this across that broad spectrum is probably quite difficult. But their diversity inclusion activities include allocating extensive resources to ensuring that all of the employees actually help create an inclusive environment wherever they are around the world. Their global diversity inclusion vision is to maximize the global power of diversity and inclusion, and to drive superior business results and sustainable competitive advantage. Single guiding North Star, and everybody adheres to the principles. And the way they strive to make this happen is through employee resource groups, mentoring programs, and a diversity university, which is really great. It's a dynamic website that helps employees understand the benefits of collaborative work and giving them some guiding principles on how to lean in and be part of that. An important point for me here, Kevin, is that they've got a chief diversity officer, who reports directly to the CEO and chairman of J&J, meaning that the whole operation is overseen by top-level management to achieve this. And that is really a fantastic piece. Yeah.
Great. It's so awesome to see that. And I'm waiting for corporates to start having a chief mental officer, someone who looks after mental health and how your mental health is doing in corporate.
And Kevin, that actually really falls under the auspices of the diversity and inclusion mantra, because mental health is an important part of the construct. So let's see how many more organizations create these new roles. Really, really great. The next organization to review is MasterCard, the financial services business. They got over 13,400 employees worldwide, and they believe that diversity is what drives better insights, better decisions, and better products. And that's the backbone of innovation. And I really, really like that as well. MasterCard has delivered another unique program the past few years, which has involved getting old employees in the company to become more active on social media. And this is quite great because they've developed a young professionals business resource group to address this generational barrier. And they offer one-on-one social media reverse mentoring programs to old employees who want to become more familiar with social media platforms. A really great initiative. The next organization is Accenture, and it was important for me to bring a consulting firm business into the mix here, because whilst they're not producing widgets and consumer goods, they're really influencing the mind state of many organizations that they work with, and if you're able to weave the foundation of good thinking around this topic into the services that you're offering other firms, you're definitely on the right way here. So how's this for you? They've got over 513,000 employees worldwide, Kevin. Yeah, it's unreal. And they believe that no one should be discriminated against because of their differences, such as age, disability, ethnicity, gender identity, expression, religion, or sexual orientation. Their diversity training is broken into 3 different categories within the organization. They have diversity awareness, which is to help people understand the benefits of working within a diverse organization. They have diversity management, which is to equip the executives to manage diverse teams. And they've got professional development, which is to enable women, LGBT, and ethically diverse employees build skills for success, because obviously that they've been lower down the spectrum for opportunities in the past. Accenture also holds a company-wide celebration on International Day of Persons with Disabilities, and it helps employees with various forms of support like assistive technology, flexible working arrangements, and additional training in that regard. But the last company that I want to touch on here is Coca-Cola, the world famous beverage organization. They've got over 86,200 employees worldwide. They see diversity as more than just policies and practices, and they see it as an integral part of who they are as a company, how they operate, and how they see their future. And for me, that really should be the bedrock of any organization, in my opinion. I want to just cover that again. They see diversity as more than just policies and practices. It's an integral part of who they are as a company, how they operate, and how they see their future. Their diversity education program includes diversity training and a diversity speaker series and a diversity library. And in 2017, they implemented a new parental benefit policy, which provided 6 weeks of paid leave to both new mothers and fathers. And interestingly, this move was actually championed by the Coca-Cola Millennial Voices, which is a group of young employees that are tasked with making sure that there's a healthy level of employee retention in the millennium consumer and staff members of the organization.
Craig, listening to this, I think, and that's what I love about the shows. It's when you're shining a spotlight on how successful brands do it. What are the learnings that we take from this, and what do we see that people are doing, and brands are doing out there that doing it right? They're getting it right, to a large degree, and they putting that messaging forward. I think I think having that spotlight on these conversations is absolutely a key point to why we do the show as well.
And again, the more we see the likes of metrics and reports becoming a prerequisite when reporting your financial year end, listed entities are now mandated to start providing these kinds of insights. The more we see that, the more we come to terms with what those metrics mean and how to actually achieve them, the quicker we're going to get to a point where there's real understanding and delivery around diversion, inclusion, and belonging, and that needs to happen much quicker than it is, Kevin.
Absolutely. So, Craig, as we near to the end of the show today, what are the key summary points that we have for the listeners?
Kevin, I want to reference key points from an article titled "Leaders in Diversity and Inclusion: 5 Lessons from Top Global Companies." It was published on Aperion.com, and the article opens by stating the following. Companies with gender, ethnic, and racial diversity are at least 15% more likely to experience above average financial returns. They also know that companies within the top quartile for radical and ethnic diversity are 35% more likely to do the same. So 15% average, top quartile, at least 35% added onto the bottom line. So between fostering innovation and learning to properly monitor and model their efforts, we have gleaned from these leading companies 5 important lessons for organizations to successfully implement diversity and inclusion efforts that will have global relevance. And I thought it's a really great set of points to end the conversation with, because these are the kinds of things that our listeners can really review, question, and actually take back into their organizations and challenge their businesses if they're not in place yet.
Yeah.
So lesson 1 is recognizing the shift in global understanding of diversity and inclusion. And it's a new way of thinking about diversity and inclusion, and it focusing on meeting the needs of individuals and not so much as an HR-centered initiative, which it's been for so many years. Today, it's not only about having diversity within a company, but actually leveraging that diversity to produce better products and services. Lesson number 2 is to build an inclusive environment. It's become important to create environments where all people are encouraged to draw upon their unique experiences, perspectives, and backgrounds so as to advance business goals. And to achieve this in a global work setting, it's crucial to employ effective global communications and training efforts. Lesson 3 is to use multiple practices and measures. Diversity and inclusion should not be treated as a once-off initiative. Many leaders struggle on how to manage the continuity of workplace diversity. Promoting diversity and inclusion in the workplace is a constant work in progress, and it should be maintained and nurtured to be effective. So instead of looking at turnover rates and other numbers, there's a need for measuring ROI based on the different indicators and granular information, such as employee responses, consistent feedback about policies and behavior in the workplace. Lesson 4 is to ensure that leaders model diversity and inclusion. And it's critical that senior leadership model diversity and inclusion when they own D&I and make themselves part of the diversity and inclusion management process. It sets the tone for the rest of the organization to follow suit. And as we heard earlier on, a chief diversity and inclusion officer really sitting in the right place, seat around the table, reporting directly to CEOs and chairmen, and that's essential. And the last lesson in those 5 is to recognize the connection between innovation and diversity and inclusion. And perhaps the most significant lessons is that diversity and inclusion increases innovation and reduces business risk. And for all the reasons we stated earlier about different thinking coming to the table, different conversation, different points of view, different life experiences from different segments of society really bring the opportunity for thinking about innovation in a different way. So while some organizations are exploring the cognitive bias aspects, diversity. In fact, let me start again. Some organizations are exploring the concept of cognitive diversity or diversity of thinking in the workplace. And this comprises of 4 dimensions of perspective, interpretations, heuristics, and predictive models. And I know you totally familiar with every single one of those concepts because they form key to the work that you do, Kevin. But let's have a quick look at each of these for our listeners. Yeah. So perspectives, people represent situations in different ways, and in the global workplace, it will help to have multiple perspectives when it comes to representing a problem, as they'll see different possible solutions. From an interpretations point of view, employees obviously interpret situations and problems that other people see in different ways and classify them accordingly. Through diverse interpretations, teams can therefore discover multiple resolutions to situations and challenges within the business. From a heuristics point of view, people resolve issues in different ways, proving that there are multiple ways to arrive at a conclusion. And obviously, when that level of respect is in place, you're going to probably get to an endpoint much quicker as well. And the final point there is predictive models. So to make predictions, some organizations analyze and others look for a story, but both are useful in discovering workplace solutions. So to end on that particular point, Kevin, I want to reference a paragraph from the article that we mentioned earlier, the 4 brands embracing diversity in their content. It was published by Hannah Sears, a freelance writer, and it was found on pixel.com brand marketing blog, and it notes the following. Customers are holding brands accountable for their work around diversity and inclusion, a mindset that will only continue to garner support. Brands who commit to representing diverse faces, voices, experiences, and abilities authentically help to promote equality and respond to their customers' desires to see real people. And the real people we spoke about in the likes of Nike and Dove ads. And those are the key points to end the conversation with today, Kevin.
Craig, I'm so glad that you bring the thinking models into this, because you know, just from a perspective of considering the diversity of what people are and the cultures that they grow up in. And randomly, just for like a simple example, is, you know, from an Afrikaans background. I come from a very religious Afrikaans kind of background, and you know, the way that we grew up was that, you know, you listen to your parents and you follow their advice, and that's how you made decisions. You know, our thinking perspective was quite dictated to us. And, you know, just from that perspective, if you take every single person's way of, you know, thinking into consideration, you suddenly realize that every solution, every problem, every opportunity that you're looking for within your business stems from just a very, very different perspective the whole time. So, you know, it lends itself so well to why it's so important to consider this as part of your business.
Yeah, and a good point you make there again, because there was that phrase "to be seen and not heard" was really, you know, a critical reference point to what you've just said now. So as youngsters growing up in quite strict households, that was one of the phrases. So yeah, I totally get that.
So Craig, finally, what are we lined up for next week's show?
So next week, we're going to invite another one of our businesses that was selected to participate in Hollard Insurance's Big Ads for Small Businesses campaign. And it'd be great to have a guest join us in person again.
Fantastic. Yeah, looking forward to that. And that's all in aim of the support of Hollard's hashtag Big Ads for Small Businesses. Guys, if you want to join us, it's every Thursday at 12 on ebizradio.com. And we if you want to follow everything we're doing, it's all online. You can go and re-look at the podcast. You can look at the videos that we share. And Craig has a wonderful way of weaving everything together, so it follows on a fantastic narrative. Craig, thank you for today, and thanks for the information.
Your pleasure, Kevin. Looking forward to next week.
Chat to you soon. Cheers.
Ciao, bye.
Bye.